Hi, everybody. My name's Jacqui Ward, and I'm going to be talking to you about the planning cycle in action in family daycare. And it's part of the PD in Your Pocket series, which is free professional development for family daycare. And it's brought to you by New South Wales Family Daycare Association Incorporated. So if you've done any of the PD in Your Pockets before, you will know that there is an associated booklet, and the recordings of these sessions are published on the website with the booklet and also with the interviews that we've got in the session today. So if you haven't already got your booklet, you can access it through the QR code. So as I mentioned before, my name is Jacqui Ward, and I am an early childhood teacher for too many years to mention, and I've worked for lots of different organisations, including owning and managing my own long daycare centre, working with CELA, with all different service types across the state to deliver the professional development and support program. I have worked at ASIQA, so as Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority, again working to support services to engage with the National Quality Framework and the Approved Learning Frameworks across Australia. And more recently, I've worked at the New South Wales Department of Education. So it's a little bit about me. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge country, and I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, which is where I'm coming to you from today in Pyrmont in Sydney. And I would encourage you all, if you'd like, although I'll let you know that I cannot see the chat, but if you'd like to pop your acknowledgements in the country of where you're in the chat of where you're joining us from today, that would be great. So what we're covering tonight is we hope that this session will support you to understand how to implement the continuous cycle of observing, planning, reflecting and documenting children's learning to inform a quality program in family daycare, that will share how the updated early years learning framework and My Time, Our Place and planning cycle can be used as guides to plan for and document children's learning and development. We'll provide some scenarios, stories of practice, and suggested resources based on the planning cycle in action in family daycare. There's an extensive list of resources, by the way, in the booklet that's associated with this session. And we'll also be offering some inspiration from a family daycare educator and an educational leader as they share their approaches to how they make decisions about curriculum planning in the moment and throughout the day and over time. A really amazing couple of educators that you'll hear from later in the session today. So I hope that you will enjoy tonight's session. We do have a question and answer session, a section of the PL right at the end. So given the fact that I can't see the question box, it's probably a good idea not to put it in there, but maybe write it down or jot it down on a piece of paper in case you'd like to ask it at the end. But also you might find as we progress through the session tonight that you actually get your questions answered, hopefully, throughout as we go through. So you were asked some questions on enrolment for this session tonight, and I was really very excited actually about this information that we got here. I'm sorry, I've got a little box that's covering the answers here, so I'm just going to move that. To see that, oh, sorry, I went ahead one. Let's go back. To see that there was such a significant amount of people that were really confident, very confident. So 23% of people said they were very confident. We have a massive 59% who said they were somewhat confident. So I think that's a really, really positive thing worth noting, that's I think nearly 82% that are either somewhat or very confident, which is amazing. We've got 15% that are not very confident. Hopefully we can lift that to at least a somewhat confident by the end of tonight. And we've got 3% that answered that they weren't confident at all. So again, hopefully you've got some information. And if you're attending tonight with or without your educational leader, maybe it's an opportunity for you to have a conversation with them as well. So which part of the planning cycle do you find most challenging? I was also really interested to see this one. We've got, I think, 10%. Okay, obviously, because they don't find it the most challenging to observe children. We've got 16% saying that that's the hardest bit for them is assessing, and 20% are saying planning, 16% implementing, and 38% evaluating. So I'm really hoping that you'll get some really good tips from tonight on how to evaluate your program, to measure your impact, and critically reflect on how you might make some changes to your approaches. And then we've got 69% of people answering that they use observation and other forms of documentation to document children's learning. We've got 4% using floor books and other things. I think our educator Tanja talks about floor books. She's quite a fan, but again, there's no mandatory way of doing things. Looks like we've got 8% doing journals and other things. We've got 3% doing summative assessments, and we've got 15% using digital forms. Digital platforms, I think, are becoming more and more popular. And again, maybe people use a blend of both, because I think that's what Tanja mentions in her interview as well. And we've got how often do we capture the voices of children and families in the planning cycle and use these to inform curriculum decision making. So we've got a really good more than a third of the audience saying consistently that that's what happens in their service. And then we've got another significant portion that say often, which is awesome. And then we've got 25% that say sometimes. I'm guessing maybe that 25% might like to lift that a little bit, and 4% that are saying never. So again, maybe there's an opportunity to hear ways that you could involve children and families tonight. So we're going to start the session tonight by having a little bit of a discussion about what is the planning cycle. So the planning cycle is a process of planning and documenting children's learning to ensure that you achieve the best quality outcomes for children. It involves you using lots of different ways to find out and document what children can do, know, and understand. I'm a really big fan of this phrase because I think it says so much about what sort of information that we're looking for and what sort of things that we'd like to promote learning in. So what can children do? And they tell us this in lots of ways, by doing things, by talking to us about things, by expressing their knowledge and understanding through, the interests that they're interested in. I'm sure all of us can relate to a child who knew a lot about dinosaurs or dogs or whatever they might have been interested in. And I think they also show us a lot about their understanding when they do things in our programs, when they experiment with things, when they, try out different ways and different techniques. And it also involves you as an educator thinking about how these observations make children's learning visible. So how you can see what children are learning by what they're doing and what they're saying. And it's about all the blocks and coming together, I guess, to say, yes, I can see and understand that all these bits fit together to tell me that this child is learning this thing. They're learning to do this thing, know this thing, or understand this thing. It helps you to plan and implement experiences. So they're not coming from nowhere, what you're planning. They're not just topics that you're picking out of the air or themes. Many, many moons ago, we used to have themes that we ran things by. In the school space, they have their different key learning areas. But in our early childhood space, the planning is based on what we see children learning about. It involves you thinking about what went well and what might be an area for improvement. So for yourself as an educator, what strategies you could do more of, what strategies you could improve of, how you might adjust and modify your learning environments, your small group experiences, all of those sorts of things. And it also involves you evaluating your own practice and program to discover if it's inclusive of everyone and if it reflects the learning outlined in the framework. So when I say frameworks there, I mean all of the approved learning frameworks, but also in the National Quality Framework. So is it reflective of the legislation? Is it reflective of the quality standards? Are we capturing what we need to be capturing when we're doing our program for children? So why is the planning cycle important? This is a little quote that I quite like from the National Guide to the National Quality Framework. And I think it really, I guess, for me, it captures what we're trying to do in our programs, in our educational program and practice. Planning ensures that the educational program and practice responds to children's strengths, abilities, and interests, and scaffolds and extends their learning. I don't know of a way that we could do that without using the planning cycle, without basing what we know and what we're planning off what we've learned about what children are interested in. So that idea that, these things they do well, their strengths, as I said, what they can do, know and understand is reflective of their abilities, and what sort of things that children are interested in. And the reason why interests are really important for us in early childhood is that's the way children learn. If they're not interested, there's not much you can do to get that child engaged in activity. They just won't participate. So that's one of the reasons why children's interests are a vehicle for helping to support and scaffold and extend their learning. And the second bit of this quote says it ensures that educators' practice is intentional and supports children to progress towards the learning outcomes. So the learning outcomes of My Time, Our Place, or the Early Years Learning Framework learning outcomes. So I think that's really important too, because we're going to be talking about that today. That's what we're trying to progress children's learning against, those learning outcomes. So we're not necessarily concerned whether or not they learned a lot more about dinosaurs, but we're definitely more concerned that they develop a strong sense of identity, that they're connected and contribute to their world, that they have a strong sense of well-being, that they're confident, involved learners, and that they're effective communicators, which are all the learning outcomes. I sort of feel like I'm kind of talking to no one because I can't see the screen, but I'm hoping that if there's any issues, Ethan, can I just check in with you if there's any problems or anything coming up in the chat? No? All right, well, I'll assume everything's good. I haven't got any messages from Ethan. So as I mentioned before, the planning cycle is really a critical tool for educators, and it helps you understand what your children are interested in and what they're curious about, because those are the things, as I said before, are the things that will capture children and encourage their learning. Ethan's just given me the thumbs up that everything's good. Like I mentioned before, it allows you to, the planning cycle supports you to know what children know and can do. Again, which is really important for us to know what children already know about, because there's lots of elements within the learning outcomes and their key components that involve children knowing and understanding themselves, their world, and ways and methods of communicating information, ICT, and all sorts of mathematical ideas and concepts and ways of interacting with each other and health and well-being things. So we need to know what they already know, because we don't want to be providing them with experiences that they already know, because, again, they're not going to be engaged. It also helps you understand the experience and strategies you can plan and implement to support their learning. So if we know what they're interested in and what they can do, that sort of gives us the idea of a little bit coming in, sort of thinking with Vygotsky here, the theorist, where we know where to take them to that next level or that next step up. The zone of proximal learning, the resources and materials you can choose to support their learning, because, again, if they've been interested to play with something or experimenting with something, you might choose to use those materials and resources again to take that learning to the next step. and how to support each child to achieve the learning outcomes. Again, that's kind of the point of our programs. And how to reflect on and improve your practice as an educator. So I'm interested to see that there was quite a lot of people that were, I guess had more issues with that side of things. So hopefully you'll get some ideas today. So knowing what's required, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because I have, I want to allow plenty of time for we've got lots of video content there. We've also got some practical activities, but I do think it's always important that we know that we're actually required under the legislative and quality standards to use the planning cycle. So it's not optional. We do need to know what's required, and we do need to know what's required within that those quality and legislative standards. So there's information in the guide to the National Quality Framework, and that's, I guess, a folder, if you like, for the legislative standards and the national quality standards. And then, as I mentioned before, we've also now got included in the new approved learning frameworks, we've also got some information that tells us what to do in the new frameworks as well, the updated frameworks. So there's a QR code on the screen there. If you'd like to take a little pic with your phone, that will take you to the links to things. So if you see the QR code, always good idea to hover your phone over there and click on those links. We're just going to break down those requirements in the next couple of slides. Now, I know this is a lot of content to have up on the screen, and I was umming and ahhing. I thought, it's kind of the rule of presentations not to put too many words on the slide, but I always think it's really important for people to actually know what do the regulations say about what you need to document, because I often follow a lot of social media and talk to a lot of educators. And there's always a bit of confusion over what do I need to do, or does this meet the requirement, or does this meet the requirement? If you actually know what's required under the legislative and quality standards and what's written in the framework, it does give you a strong, solid base to know what you're doing is the right way to do it, basically, or the right approach. I'm going to give you a bit of a reflection. Again, I'm sorry I can't see the chat, but I'm going to give you a chance to have a reflect on it, and maybe you might like to ask some questions in the end. But whether or not you really knew all of these things is what you needed to do, and whether or not what's missing, I guess. And I'm going to leave that hanging because, as I said, I can't see the chat. So, well, this is what the regulations say. So Regulation 73 says that the educational program should contribute to the following outcomes for each child. So we talked about those before. Those are the 5 learning outcomes. And we know that there are 20, 20 key components that go underneath across all of those 5 outcomes. So the framework, the approved learning frameworks are quite specific already in what they think the educational program should be doing. Regulation 74 asks educators to document for children under school age assessments of children's developmental needs, interests, experience, participation in the program. So even though that one doesn't actually say the planning cycle, that's exactly what it's referring to. So assessing children's needs and interests, and then planning learning experiences and implementing them, and reflecting and evaluating on how they've participated in the program. And then again, there's a reinforcement there to say that children's learning should be assessed against the learning outcomes, and we should be measuring their progress. And for children over preschool age, so if you've got school age children within your family daycare program, it's evaluations of the child's wellbeing, development and learning. So not the same requirements for older children, which makes sense because those children are already having their learning assessed at school. So Regulation 75 and 76 talk about the fact that information about the contents, operation of the educational program is displayed at a place that's accessible to parents. I saw a question in the one of the social media chat groups that I follow the other day, and someone was asking, can we just run with the program? Does it have to be pre-written? And this is the regulation that talks about the fact that you do need to have a written educational program. You need to display it. And you also need to be sharing information with families about how their child's involved in the program and how they're participating and how they're learning and growing based on the program. So that's kind of a bit of a summary of the regulations. So I really encourage you, when you get the booklet, to have a read through and have a think about how you guys are meeting that. The question that I was going to ask you, and again, if I could see the chat, I'd see people popping things in there, is what do you think is missing from this? Because we often get questions, again, when I've been supporting services or, wherever. So how much do I need to document and how do I need to do it? And all of those questions. And as you can see here, the regulations don't state those particular things, and neither does the National Quality Standards or the approved learning framework. So the how you do it, the methods and techniques that you use is really up to you. And again, it might be different. Everything might be different for different educators. Different approaches will work for different people. So again, the assessment and planning is one of the standards, and the concept name of the standard. And the standard itself talks about educators and coordinators taking a planned and reflective approach to implementing the program for each child. So that's kind of an overarching statement that captures critical reflection as well. And element 1.3.1 talks about the assessment and planning, that each child's learning and development is assessed or evaluated as part of an ongoing cycle of observation, analysing learning, documentation, planning, implementation, and reflection. So there's also another requirement for us to be making sure that the planning cycle is part of our day-to-day practice. Then we've got using the approved learning frameworks to plan your program. I know Tanja later on talks a lot about the, one of her favourite things about the updates to the learning frameworks is the really explicit information in there now about the planning cycle within the frameworks themselves. Page 28, she refers to quite a bit. So if you haven't already had a look at them, I really encourage you to have a little look. One of the things you might notice, because they used to be different colours, the triangle, I call it the child safe triangle because it doesn't have any pointy edges. The triangle for the Early Years Learning Framework and My Time, Our Place used to be different colours, and they're still slightly different wording, but it's very nominal, the difference between the two. So if you've got your phone out, just click that. So again, I like this quote from page 10 of the EYLF, and it's also page 8 of My Time, Our Place. The framework puts children's learning at the core and comprises interdependent elements: the vision, the principles, the practices, and the learning outcomes. All elements are fundamental to early childhood pedagogy and effective curriculum decision-making. So one of the things, whilst we've talked about and we've focused in the planning cycle being very sort of focused in on progressing children's learning against the learning outcomes, the principles and practices and the overarching themes will still be very present in your planning cycles. So you will definitely be drawing on the practices to plan and implement. You'll be drawing on the principles to be observing and assessing and planning and implementing. So if you're not super familiar with all aspects of the Early Years Learning Framework and My Time, Our Place, and in particular the updated versions, I really encourage you to have a read through those. And again, I hope that it will really support your knowledge and understanding of the planning cycle. For those, I can't remember the exact number, but I'm thinking it was about 32% or 39% that were thinking that the evaluation part of the planning cycle was tricky. I think the new section, I think I've got it on this. So the new practice of assessment and evaluation for learning, development and wellbeing actually has some really, really good and very useful information around evaluation and assessment. So I would definitely encourage you having a read of that. And if you find that it's a bit heavy going, don't forget to, engage with your educational leader and connect maybe with some other educators that might have already, been reading and reflecting and thinking about it. The Early Years Learning Framework updated versions will be the mandatory frameworks as of the start of 2024. So you've still got some time up your sleeve to become familiar with the changes and think about what they mean for your program. And again, there's the new descriptors in there, which again align nicely with the expectations of the legislation and the quality, legislative and quality standards. And there's some nice posters as well from ASEQA that you can get. And again, I really like this quote as well. Assessment refers to the gathering information about children and young people's wellbeing, learning and development using a range of strategies. So some of the things that we're going to use some examples today, we're going to be talking about learning stories, or as we already mentioned in the pre-question quizzes, we asked you, did you do summative assessments? Do you use floor books? How else do you use what sort of strategies, I guess, to use to gather information. And again, evaluation refers to educators' critical reflection on and analysis of this information and consideration of the effectiveness of their planning and the implementation of the curriculum. So I think that one hopefully gives everyone a little bit of an idea that part of this cycle process is not just continuing to do things and not really thinking about whether or not they've worked well for children and whether or not they're appropriate, whether they're culturally appropriate or culturally responsive, or whether or not they're, inclusive of a range of different needs within your programs. Some people might have some additional needs that one size fits all might not be appropriate for. So we're going to move on to now a bit of an unpacking of each stage of the cycle. So we mentioned before, in fact, I'm just going to go back there very quickly because I also wanted to point out, again, page 28 of the Early Years Learning Framework, and I think it's on page 27 at my timer place. It actually has some little descriptors under each section now. So I'm pointing to the little chart that's on the left-hand side of the screen. And it talks to you about what you need to be doing in each one of those sections. So again, I think that's a really great place to start thinking about what you're going to implement based on this PL that you're attending tonight, because you've invested your time at 7 o'clock or 7:30 now, but it was 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night. You want to make sure that once you've finished this session tonight, you have a think about what you're doing and whether or not you think you're sort of capturing some information in each one of those 5 stages. So again, if you haven't already had a look at that, have a look at that in the updated versions of the Early Years Learning Framework. So we've got 2 examples tonight. I'm just going to pause there for a little minute. And hopefully everyone's enjoying the content so far. Just a reminder, we've got a question and answer section at the end. So I can't see the chat. So if you've got any questions, please let me know at the end and I'm happy to try and answer them. I know that we've got quite a lot of people enrolled in this session tonight, so I might not be able to get through everyone's questions, but I will try. So what we're going to be doing now is we've got 2 examples. One is a video that we're going to watch, and then we're going to, talk about what we do to try and gather up information. And then we've got an example on screen that we're going to unpack. And then we're going to hear from some educators, as I mentioned before. So hopefully you'll get lots and lots of very good practical ideas. And when we're looking at these observations, you might say to yourself, I can see different learning than what's written on the screen. And that's awesome. I really encourage you to think about what else do you see in this example that we've provided, because that's the great thing about early childhood programs, is that everyone might interpret things in a different way. Everyone might notice different things, different types of learning. And it's another really great thing about, having an opportunity to talk to other people about what you're noticing children doing. So if you've got the opportunity to chat to other educators, family daycare educators, or your educational leader about your program, that will be a really helpful way to kind of give you an idea of whether or not you're on the right track in progressing through the planning cycle. So we've got a video to watch, fingers crossed, it all works well with this. So it's from the Connecting with Practice series, and it's called Mint, Tea and a Chat. So we'll watch the video and then we're going to step through the planning cycle. We did do a test, so hopefully you can hear that the sound is okay. Oh, sorry.
There's no four Peter Bella. There's no there. Is there water? No. Cool.
There's water for both the future porridge. Okay, thank you.
You know what? Not too much water. There's one more. Minty. Yeah. I got to lick the cut. No. What is in there? Nothing. Minty. More. I make some more. Come on, put the mint on. Not too much water. Let's mix it. Mix it. Mix it. A little much blue. Yeah, let's fit.
I hope you enjoyed that. So I think that was a really great example myself of how very capable children are, very little children, and how capable they are of quite complex social interactions. So these are some things that you could be asking yourself. And again, these questions could be really great for you to maybe keep as a little bit of a I don't know, a cheat sheet or a reminder nearby, so that if that's the area that you found that you found most challenging, or you're not sure what you should be looking for, these are some questions that you might ask yourself. So, what are these children doing? And I think, like to the untrained eye, they're just, having a drink of water or whatever. Someone might not think they're doing anything too special. There's actually quite a lot of complex learning and engagement happening in that conversation there, and the rituals that they were involved in, the dramatic play. As we know, that's a very complex cognitive thing for young children to do. And also to be engaged in that dramatic play or that pretend play together at that age is really tricky. We also notice, I think, with the and the finger wagging, that there's lots of mimicking of adult behaviours as part of learning how to become an adult. And so lots and lots and lots of things there. So, you might see different things, as I said, to what we've written on the screen next. So feel free to write down lots of things and, give yourself a tick if you've come up with different things. I like this question before. Is this something that I've seen these children do before? Because children often are quite repetitive in their play, particularly if they're trying to work out, solve a problem, test a hypothesis, explore their concepts and understanding of the world and their connection to it. So is it something that's been happening before? Can sometimes give you an idea of what it is, the thing that they're trying to learn. So they might try and practice it across multiple different scenarios, or they might try the same thing every day for, many weeks on end. How are they interacting with each other? And you can see that there was quite a difference in the level of language and the way that the one child was engaging with the other, but they were both very happy to be involved in that engagement. What's significant about this moment? Again, it's hard to tell when you don't have the full context from a video, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And the next question is, how can I document this? And for you, if you're struggling, maybe it's just a jotting because you don't have a lot of time. Maybe English is not your first language. So maybe it's just about capturing a few things, a few points on a little Post-it note or whatever. Maybe learning stories are your preference. You prefer to tell a story and your family's really engaged with that. Maybe a photo helps with an annotation or an explanation, really helps you to explain and make that child's learning visible. Or maybe whatever you're looking at might be a children's work sample, so a drawing, a painting, or writing. And again, you might write some information alongside that, sample of work. So we've got something that we've written up before. So this is a learning story example. We've got a date there. I didn't move that sharing button before. I'll just hide it. Hopefully it doesn't have an impact. In our test run, it did. So I was a bit nervous about hiding it. So the mint tea example here, I'm going to read it out, but you can all have a little read along the screen. And again, feel free to note some other things, some other learnings that you think were evident in that little video. Today, I noticed a lovely interaction between Aisha and Lauren as they were waiting for morning tea. Aisha set the table, ensuring there was a coaster for each child, with Lauren responding with a thank you, which initiated a conversation about who each coaster is for. That's not for you, that for you, Aisha explained, and went on to say, for me. Lauren responded with, for me, for Bibabella. And they discussed this further. A deep connection developed as Aisha and Lauren responded to each other with expressive gestures, eye contact, smiles, questions, and nods of the head to acknowledge the messages they were receiving from each other. The conversation continued when the educator offered water. Aisha supported Lauren to understand the amount of water to pour, not too much, out of the glass jug. And Lauren acknowledged this instruction with a nod and by pouring with great care. And she only gave herself a little bit too, didn't she? Aisha filled Lauren's glass with a little more for her, and they both announced they were drinking mint tea. I don't know if you noticed that in the cup, but there was a little bit of mint in the water. Throughout this experience, Aisha offered options for play. More water? Let's mix it. When Lauren articulated she didn't have a spoon, Aisha provided one. And again, I'm pretty sure that Aisha looked to me like she was probably not even quite 3, which I think are all very amazing parts of learning that were happening there. So again, I'm going to reiterate that you might have noticed some other things in that video, particularly when we talk about what learning outcomes of the framework can relate this significant learning to. So we're going to have a little sort of unpacking. And again, these might be some questions that you might keep on hand if that was the area if assessing learning was the area that you struggle with or that you are most challenged by, then this might be some questions that might help prompt you. So what learning is happening for each child? Is it about the topic, not necessarily about mint tea, or about children's learning dispositions such as curiosity, persistence, or creativity? I think we saw a little bit of creativity in this one, and definitely some persistence and some, I guess, some curiosity about, what the mint tea was like and how we might be drinking it and whether or not it needs a stir. Why is this significant for this child or the group of children? And there was definitely, again, I think, a huge amount of significance in the way these two children were engaging in that complex social interaction. What learning outcomes are the frameworks can I relate this significant learning to? And are they the same for all children? What theories or theorists could you refer to when describing the learning? And again, these are not things that you need to do. Definitely the learning outcomes one is really important, but the theories one, again, I think it's more important for me anyway, and this is my personal opinion, is that we think and we know and understand how theories influence the way that we understand and interpret children's learning, and we use theorists to plan and implement really relevant, appropriate strategies for children. But having calling out a theory or a theorist might really help you to go, yes, I can see that's Piaget's stages of development happening there, or I can see that's, as I mentioned before, Piaget, I can see that sort of scaffolding is happening there, that zone of proximal learning. So this is an example of how this learning might be assessed, analysed and interpreted. So Lauren is new to family daycare and Aisha has been actively looking after her, demonstrating help, care and empathy to support her smooth transition. I think we'd all be lucky if we had an Aisha to help us settle in, and we had an Aisha in our family daycare program who was helping people, explaining the rules and helping and engaging in such a warm and lovely way. She was definitely creating a lovely sense of belonging for Lauren. This was a lovely interaction where Aisha once again used a routine time of the day, morning tea, to initiate an interaction with Lauren and engage in a shared conversation. This also supported Lauren to feel safe, secure and supported in her new environment. And in this interaction, I noticed that she was very comfortable responding to Aisha's suggestions and sharing her own ideas. She definitely looked like she was enjoying it. There's a link here to learning outcome number 1, that children have a strong sense of identity. So children feel safe, secure and supported. And I think we saw that for both children, but in a different way. For Aisha was that person who was being that learned other for children and helping to create that sense of security for Lauren. And we saw Lauren welcoming her peer to help her and scaffold her own learning and settling in. And children learn to interact in relation to others with care, empathy and respect. And I think that's there was lots of that happening with both children in that case. You may also notice there was some other, related outcomes in learning outcome number 5. We've talked about that, using language and pretend play and creative arts there. In their play. And there was also a little bit of, I think, a little bit of experimentation. So some learning outcome number 4. You might have noticed some other links to learning outcomes. And again, it's not meant to be necessary that you need to write all of the learning outcomes. It just might be some of those things might have stood out more for you than others. So in this example, we're thinking about planning and implementing. And I put these two together because I think the implementing part is more about the doing and the making adjustments as you go along. So it's a little bit harder to write about in a scenario like this, because it'll actually be the strategies and things that you actually do when you implement the program. But definitely still something to think about in the implementing stage. Excuse me, as if to say, if there are more ideas, I guess, that come to you, you might record those as a sort of a in the moment kind of planning. So implementing can also be the doing, but also some changes and modifications you might make based on any particular changes in circumstance on that particular day. So we have up the top, again, I'm going to remind you lots of times, because I think these questions might be great to have handy when you're thinking about how you document the planning cycle. So first question is, how can I respond to this play? So what can I do to extend and support and scaffold this learning? What's happening in there, and where can I take this learning? How can I, well, there you go. How can I support and extend on the knowledge, strengths, ideas, abilities, and interests we observed these children demonstrating in this play? What experience will I plan, or experiences? You might decide that this is quite a significant, observation and assessment of learning. You might decide to plan quite a range of different things based on that. What strategies will I use to contribute to the learning? And in this section, that's where you really draw on the principles and practices of the approved learning framework. So particularly the practices when we think about things like holistic approaches. So I'll use, a range of different approaches to support these children's learning. I'll be responsive, I'll be culturally responsive. I'll support children through, transitions and routines and all those sorts of things. And what resources and materials could I include? That one encapsulates the play-based learning and the learning environment, doesn't it? So how will I set up my learning environments, and how will I set up play experiences for children to learn and grow based on this learning that was observed? What learning goal or learning outcomes do I hope these children will continue to progress towards that I've identified in the observation? So we talked about a few others there, but we talked about learning outcome number 1. That might be the focus for you in terms of this plan. And how can I document this? Again, there is no prescribed way to document. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't have enough time to write all of these things, figure out a way that works for you. Again, it could be a digital platform. It could be some floor books that you do with the children. There's lots of things that you can engage documentation styles, I guess, and approaches that you can do with children. They don't necessarily have to be outside of, the time that you're spending with children. And one of the things that is really nice, I think, and important about documenting with children is that we're able to involve children in their own learning, and children actually participating, if you like, in collecting information about what they're learning, how they're learning, and what plans we have in place to support their learning. Helps to encourage children to be very connected and confident learners. So what does this look like in practice? So planning and implementing. What next? I will continue to provide opportunities for Aisha and Lauren to interact with each other, promoting the development of this friendship as well as their language. So some really important things there in terms of that learning outcome number 2, that sort of interconnectedness, and also learning outcome number 5 with their language. One way is to continue to invite them to set the table for meal times each day as a joint ritual. I've been wanting to say it for quite a while, but I haven't mentioned it already. Children learn so much through their ritual routine times, meal times, hygiene times, sleep times, all sorts of different rituals. Children are learning, and it's a great opportunity for them to revisit learning and discuss learning that they've learned about throughout the day in other places. So I think that's a really great idea when you've got, particularly if you've observed this learning at a meal time. It can become a really important thing to scaffold and extend that child's learning through that opportunity. I'll also create an outdoor water experience where they will be able to create more mint tea or other concoctions as they mix ingredients such as herbs, leaves, and other natural materials, working together to experiment and express ideas about what they'd like to do. So again, learning outcome number 4 there, and learning outcome number 5 as well. So again, you might have looked at that and you might have thought, I might have gone in a different direction, or I might have planned another activity. And that's okay, because as I said, we're all looking through a different lens when we're, running through the planning cycle. This is just an example of what you might do in this particular case. So the last section, we're talking about evaluating and critically reflecting. And I like to think that people who are interested to be a part of this wonderful early childhood sector, I feel like they're naturally pretty good at this. But I think, maybe we get a little bit confused as to, labeling the things that we're doing that are actually evaluating and critically reflecting. So I'm hoping these examples will really give you an idea, and these prompt questions will really give you an idea. Yeah, I am doing that. I do that, when I talk to my educational leader about this, or I do that when I chat to parents and I talk about, some of these things. What learning happens. So did children learn the things that we wanted them to learn? Did they progress in that learning outcome? Or did they learn some different things? Because sometimes children might not be interested in what we offer, and they might actually give us some insight into the fact that they were actually quite interested in something else, or their interest changed and their learning interest and experimenting changed. Where to next? Can we see that there's that progression of learning? Can we see that we need to take them to that next step of learning? What went well? So that one's kind of like, what did the children respond well to, but also what were the things that I did and said that went well, as the educator in this situation? Did I say too much? Did I intervene too much? Or did they need a little bit more direction? Did I need to set up the equipment in a different way? So having a think about that, what could I improve on? Am I being inclusive, and does my practice align with the professional standards? That's an expectation of the National Quality Standard, that our practice aligns with professional standards in quality area number 4. And by professional standards, I mean things like the legislation and the National Quality Standard and the Early Years Learning Framework and My Time, Our Place, and other things like the Code of Ethics and other things that help us to know what we should be doing with children. So having a think about that, that's where we start to get a little bit critically reflective. And I think that's a really important one, because we know that sometimes we don't realise it, but sometimes we can exclude some children, or not be as culturally responsive as we think we are being, if we haven't reflected in the end to see, did different children respond in different ways, and was that because of what I was offering? Who can I discuss this with? And again, if you were one of the 39% who this is your area of challenge, I really encourage you to spend some time and book in some time with your educational leader, book in some time with with other family daycare educators in your program, and have a chat to how do they do this? Like, what did I notice, and what do I think I could improve on? What are they working on? What do they notice in their program? What are they working on improving, or how are they questioning whether or not they're being inclusive and whether or not their program aligns? And how can I document this? Again, you can try different approaches. You can use multiple different strategies at different times. Again, we've written this for the point of the PowerPoint all in written form, but if that's not the way you'd like to demonstrate each part of the planning cycle, you could do different things at different parts of the cycle, depending on what works for you and what works for your children and families. So this is the example that we're talking about. So the evaluation of those planned activities that we mentioned earlier, what worked well. Aisha was really interested in the water play experience, taking on the role of helping and supporting the other children, including Lauren. Lauren and Aisha chatted about the experiments they were creating, with Lauren saying, "It's not mint tea," and Aisha saying, "It's orange tea." They giggled, stirred the concoction, and continued to play all morning. I hopped into their play to ask open-ended questions like, "Tell me about your experiment. How did you create it together?" to promote their learning and friendship. I also introduced mathematical concepts like full, empty, more, less, and number concepts. What could I improve on? I feel that I may have turned the play into a teaching experience by taking over with mathematical concepts. Aisha and Lauren were initially interested. However, the play changed and Lauren walked away from the experience. I need to understand a better balance between child-led and educator-led play and learning. And again, maybe you don't feel initially very confident about criticizing yourself in that way. But I think, I think that evaluation, critical reflection are just opportunities for us to think about what we could do differently. And again, we don't get a real life makeover in the real world, do we? So this is an opportunity for you to have a little bit of a lament and a think about whether or not you could have done things differently, and would that have changed the circumstance. So that's a really good example of thinking about maybe not intervening in that way and making it something that you wanted it to be rather than something that the children were interested in. Again, that child-led and child-centered play is a really important aspect of quality area number 1 as well. Next step. So again, that's kind of this next steps bit is kind of the looping back of the cycle, isn't it? So what's the next thing that I'm going to plan for them, and how am I going to assess their learning? So the next steps in this case is to ask Lauren and Aisha what they would like to do together. Provide suggestions such as setting up a pretend picnic outdoors, or a real cooking experience, both where they can measure, stir, take turns, and work together to achieve a goal. So there's a couple of ideas that might, inform the next planning cycle where you observe Lauren and Aisha in some of those play experiences. And this is an example. So this is the Family Daycare Association plan template. And this is the example of one that's been completed with the information that we already went through. And basically it's supporting you, this template, in order to be able to complete the planning cycle, or the planning and implementing side of things. And again, to be able to kind of loop it around. There's an opportunity to call out which learning outcomes that you think this relates to, and an opportunity again for that kind of continuous cycle to be evidenced. So if you don't already know where to get that from, I'm hoping that perhaps Nikki might put the link to that in the chat, or mention where it might be found on the website. I think that would be really helpful. So we're going to hear from Tanja Neilsen now, and I'm just double checking on our time. I want to make sure we've got enough time, so I need to probably speed it up a little bit, but I'm sure that you'll all join me in really, I guess, gobbling up what Tanja says. She and I had a great conversation about Tanya's practices and how she, as one family daycare educator, implements the planning cycle in her service. Tanya's approach might not work for everyone, but you might be interested to hear what she has to offer, and you might take or leave some bits and pieces, some golden nuggets, I hope. Welcome everyone to our interview with the fabulous Tanja Neilsen, a family daycare educator. My name's Jacqui Ward, and I'm very excited to be chatting to Tanja because I think she's got some great things happening. Would you like to introduce yourself, Tanja, and where you're from?
Hi, Jacqui, and hi, everyone. So basically, my name is Tanja Neilsen. I'm an educator registered with Coastwide Family Daycare here in New South Wales Central Coast. I have been an educator in the family daycare setting since January 2018, and these have been the years that I've spent being an educator in the family daycare setting have been absolutely amazing, and allowed me to see how important this small group environment is for children. So it's really fabulous. Yeah,
that's a really long time, and I guess a bit of a tumultuous time too, to be a part of, like, starting something new too with the last few years with COVID and everything.
Absolutely, but then that has also allowed for even stronger connections, and just to see how amazing this service type actually is, and to see how resilient we work through those tough times as educators, and the families, enrollments continued. So it was a really great opportunity to showcase how wonderful the family daycare setting is.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tanja. So question on everyone's lips, I'm sure, is to find out some information about how you work with the assessment and planning cycle in your day-to-day. So how do you use the cycle to inform your planning for children's learning? Can you share some aspects of that?
So basically the way that I view it is that it is important that the planning cycle is embedded within the program on a daily basis, that as an educator I can see within my program where each stage of the planning cycle fits in. For me personally, it's about ensuring that each child is the central focus of my programming, and that the principles, practices and learning outcomes, as well as the national quality standards, are all interconnected within the program. So once I adopted this approach, and I felt that it was really easy to be able to observe children, analyse their learning, and then implement the plan, and obviously reflect on how that was working to further encourage that. So
awesome. So how do you balance planning for individuals and groups?
So basically, I have a monthly checklist to show which child has been planned for and in relation to which outcome. So that just allows me to sort of visually see and gauge what child I have observed and planned for, and their progress in relation to the outcomes. So I find that a really valuable tool. I think in the family daycare setting, it is quite easy to include the children on a daily basis because we have a small group of children. So each child, I ensure that each child is programmed for on a daily basis by observing what the child is trying to tell me, or possibly what their family has informed me about the child, or what the child's current interests, what their strengths are, what their knowledge is. So those daily observations are really important. And then I also use talking and thinking floor books, which I was inspired by Care Ward. So that encourages me to allow each child the opportunity to contribute their ideas within the floor book. So it sort of provides an opportunity where we program collaboratively. And I feel that that's what children really enjoy, when that they understand that we as educators want to hear what they've got to say, want to hear what they know, and what they can do and what they understand. So I feel even with reflection time with families also at the beginning and the end of each care day, that happens so seamlessly in the family daycare setting, and encourages a lot of opportunities for educators to get to know the child better and to ensure that they're planning for individual children. So that collaboration and continuous communication is essential.
You said some really great things there, Tanja. I love the idea of involving children on their own learning journey, because, if we think about the outcome, children are confident, involved learners. That's a great way to do it, isn't it? Being a part of their own learning. You also mentioned some collaborative partnerships with families. Just to elaborate on that one a little bit, I'd love to ask you, how do you involve families with those individual learning goal setting and things like that, so they're having a bit of a direction in the planning cycle as well?
Yeah, so basically my favourite way would be to give families time in the mornings and the afternoon. Sometimes parents might be quite busy to fill out a lot of paperwork that we may send in like a questionnaire format. So giving them that extra time in the morning and the afternoon to really get to know their ideas about their child, that I feel has been my biggest success with running my family daycare service. That ongoing communication with them is essential, and it really helps me understand their family culture, which then always supports the child, or allows me to support the child better whilst they are at my service. As well as I complete summative assessments, which families are then encouraged to provide goals that they may have for their child. So there's a section for the parents or the family to contribute to their learning goal via the summative assessment tool. I also use StoryPark as a tool, which is a fabulous way of connecting families as well as possibly the child's extended family. So, it might be grandparents, aunties, relatives from overseas. So getting to know that wider culture, that child's culture, and, not just what happens day to day, but sort of broadening that horizon allows for us as educators or, families to connect, possibly relatives from overseas to connect and share their insights. So I really love that platform, that social media platform.
Yeah, it's a great way to think of children as global citizens, isn't it? And I know you mentioned there also that you've got StoryPark, and I like the fact that, you've got the digital, plus you've also got the floor books as well. So there's that real physical connection for children. You've also mentioned summative assessments. I think is there anything else that you wanted to say on what methods or techniques do you use to document children's learning? Have we captured it all?
So basically, I just think as an educator, it's what works each day, like to think of it in a sense as there's not one way of documenting. It's, for example, one day I might just look at jottings of their voices, and that can give me a big insight into the children's ideas, what they're currently thinking about. And, often I'll say to myself, like, let's not overwhelm yourself, Tanja, with documenting too much. Sit down with the children, listen to what they're saying, note down some of their speech that they might be sharing throughout the day, and that can work as a great tool to really extend on the entire planning cycle. So I think every day looks different, and I think it's really important that educators understand that it doesn't have to be the same every day. So, one day I might solely focus on, my program template that I have. Then the next day I might use their voices to inspire further learning. So it's just changing it around to fit in with what works for you as an educator and the child as well. So
I love that, because the early years learning framework and My Time Our Place talk about using a range of different strategies and approaches to collect information. So I think that's amazing. And I did want to come back to what you said earlier too, that you've got that tracking sheet as well, which I just absolutely also love, because I think that really helps if you're collecting information across all of the 5 learning outcomes and their key components, because sometimes you don't realise that you might be collecting similar information. So I thought that was a really great idea as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think as an educator, having a tool like that, it actually shows you where everything's connected, and the whole cycle, the whole process isn't as overwhelming when we can sort of put it in a document to just summarise where we may have certain pieces of information. So
that's amazing. That's great. So I have a question here about how do you evaluate your impact and critically reflect on the program as a whole?
So I feel that as educators, we're evaluating and critically reflecting every day. Sometimes we don't even realise that we're doing it. So basically for me, it's a continuous thing that occurs. Whether I put it all down on a piece of paper, I know that I'm reflecting daily. So I think educators need to reassure themselves that it happens daily. In terms of how I do it, I ensure that it is embedded within my program. So I have a critical reflection page that encourages me to seek out theory and research to see what I'm doing and how that relates to, you know, a theorist perspective or current research that that has just been delivered. And then basically with that, so when we critically reflect theory and based on, can we repeat that question again, if that's all right? Sorry. I think
you've answered it, so I think we can probably move on. We'll probably cut off where you said before, because I think you said theorist twice, so
yeah,
I think you've answered it.
Okay.
So we'll move on to the last one. So what are your thoughts on the updated frameworks, and how have you engaged with the changes, and what changes have you made as a result?
So I really like the way that the planning cycle has been explained in the document. So page 28 is probably my favourite. I like the diagram there. It's easy to understand, and the terminology has been revised, which I think it's not as complex, and it really, that diagram or that table actually shows how easily we are able to show that the cycle occurs daily. So I would really encourage educators to reflect on page 28. So I also like how the principles and practices have been summarised, and how there's a stronger focus on collaborative partnerships, because for me, collaborative partnerships between you know, the child, their family, the service that educators are registered with is paramount to ensuring successful outcomes for children, and to ensuring that each service is operating at a high quality level. So I really like that focus, the fact that they've really encouraged a strong emphasis and importance on collaborative partnerships. Also, I like the way that the principles encourage educators to reflect on contemporary theories and research. This really helps us as educators understand, you know, children's behaviours on a better scale. It helps us get to know children and why they do and say certain things. And it also encourages us as educators to understand or reflect on some of our practices, and it drives continuous improvement. So yeah, so I think the document's wonderful.
Yeah, me too. And I love the fact that it now has that consistent relationship with the planning cycle with the National Quality Standard as well. And I think it'll definitely help educators to better understand the cycle and how to implement it in their programs. And that brings us to the end of our time, Tanja. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful wisdom and ideas and approaches to the planning cycle. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everyone that's contributed towards all the new changes.
All right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that chat with Tanja as much as I enjoyed chatting with Tanja. She's a great educator, and she was really very keen and passionate to share her thoughts and ideas with you. I know that there was some questions in the chat about what were the books called, and Claire Warden is an amazing speaker, early childhood professional. She's very involved in nature pedagogy, and she also talks about an approach called Floor Books, which is basically a book often a big sort of sketch pad where children are involved in documenting the learning. You know, the educator writes things down, they might draw a picture, or they might identify things that they want to tell the story of their learning, making learning visible. So if you're interested to hear about that, please do some research in that space. I'm pretty sure Early Childhood Australia has some information about that. So let's get on to our second example. So this one is based on the photo that you can see on the screen there. So please feel free to try and think about what might be happening. We don't have as much detail in a picture as we did with the videos, but we've got the same questions again. So I'm going to reiterate those questions again. And again, we're making lots of assumptions because we don't know what happened before or what happened after and all sorts of different things. But I guess it's an opportunity for us to step through this process with you. And the way we can do that is through something like a video or an image. So in this situation, what could be observed? So what are these children doing? They're quite young in this case. They're a couple of babies. And they're quite obviously engaged in some dramatic play, aren't they, with the educator? So, but what are they doing in terms of what role are they playing in the experience and what sort of things they're doing? Is this something I've seen these children do before? And again, you can see why it's really important. Tanja mentioned it, the idea of watching, listening, looking at what children are doing. You know, often we're very busy as educators because we've got lots to do. We've got lots of compliance things. We've got lots of health and safety things. We've got lots of hygiene things to do. But it is really important that if we're going to be able to do the planning cycle effectively, we need lots and lots of information that we've observed. So really important that you spend the time when you're with the children noticing what they're doing. And again, writing that down or noting it in whatever way, shape or form. It doesn't all have to be written as well. You might want to step outside of the box and do some, you know, audio recordings or some video recordings of children, anything that might help you to capture and make children's learning visible. How are they interacting with each other? So as we know, and you may not know that the updated early years learning framework talks about relational and place-based pedagogy. And those two concepts are really important in early childhood because we know that children learn very much from their relationships with each other and with the adults in their space and with the adults in their family as well. So relational pedagogy is really important, and that's really what we're talking about there. How are they interacting with each other, and also in this case with the educator. Place-based pedagogy, just in case you were worried that I wouldn't mention that, is basically that your pedagogy needs to reflect the context of where your service is in. If you're in a rural area in remote Australia somewhere, your pedagogy is going to look different to your pedagogy if you're in the midst of a big city centre in a, you know, highly built up area. So what's meaningful about this? You know, like what significant learning is happening here? And again, particularly thinking about how much babies are learning and growing and developing, it's really important that we kind of unpack that as to what's happening there and how can I document that. And in this case, we're going to look at doing some jotting. So a lot less words. And again, it might be something that someone is doing through an online platform. They might be just taking some notes on an iPad. They might be jotting some things next to a picture or whatever. But this is, you know, basically meant to tell you that you don't have to do it the same way and you don't have to write that much if that doesn't work for you. So Naya and Jai were so engaged with the baby dolls today. I noticed them feeding the dolls and offering cups for them to drink from. I joined them pretending to fill up the cup and sip the tea. Naya reached out her cup as if to cheers me. So assessing and interpreting the learning from that situation. So I know, because I was the person that wrote down that observation, this is the bit where I might be filling in the blanks, if you like. So, you know, this might all be on one piece of paper per se, or that this might be all in one sort of entry into an online learning platform. It's not necessarily going to be broken up in this space, But I think it's really prudent if we do call it out in these headings, at least, if it's all on the one page, that we can be really clear that we can showcase our planning cycle to an authorised officer or to a family member or to our educational leader or, whoever needs to be looking at our program. We can showcase that we are covering all aspects of the planning cycle. So in assessing and interpreting the learning, what learning is happening here for each child? Is it about the topic or about the children's disposition? What learning outcomes can I relate to this example? Are they the same for all children? What theories or theorists could you refer to when describing the learning? And I think Tanja really summarised it really nicely when she talked about how she thought that the value of looking at theory and research was for her. It's about helping her to understand what she's seeing when she's observing children's learning. And it's also helpful for her to critically reflect on the offerings that she's providing to support children's learning to see whether or not her practice aligns with that theory and that research. So this is an analysis, and again, as I said, it might all be on the one piece of paper. So the analysis here is that Naya and Jai were perhaps identifying with dolls. Again, I think it's really tricky for babies because they're not always telling us with their words, so we need to make some inferences. So that's why I always like to use words like perhaps when we're thinking about babies. So we're not sort of, I guess, inferring that's definitely what they were thinking about. One thing we can be certain about is that they were enjoying the interaction with each other and were connecting with me as well as the educator. I wonder if Naya was repeating a cheers action because she's seen other children do that, or perhaps her family do it. I'll ask Mom or Dad about this. So this is a really great example of how we can gather up more information, so not just from our own observations of children and our own noticing, but we can also get some information as to what's happening in a child's home context that might be informing or helping us clarify what this learning is. During this interaction, Naya and Jai are beginning to broaden their understanding of the world in which they live and building on their own social experiences to explore other ways of being. As they pretended to give the babies a drink, they demonstrated how they are beginning to use their imagination, transfer and adapt what they're learning to new situations. And with the cheers, Naya is communicating non-verbally to convey meaning. She knew that gesture was about celebrating and acknowledging. So this is learning outcome number 2. There's a link to this. Children are connected with and contribute to their world. You might also see a link there to imagination transferring and adapting learning, to learning outcome number 4, and also maybe learning outcome number 5 with communicating non-verbally. You might see other links. You might have noticed some other things, and that's okay too. So planning and implementing, how can I respond to this play? What can I support or extend on the knowledge, strengths, interests, abilities, and interests? Sorry, I said interest twice. We observe these children demonstrating this play. What experience will I plan or experiences? What strategies will I use to contribute to this learning? And again, we'll definitely need to use some quite different and specific strategies with babies. There'll be a lot more modelling and a lot more simple language when we're modelling with babies as they're learning to develop their receptive language as well as their productive language. What resources and materials could I include? Is it more of the same opportunities and experiences, or is it some different things? What learning goal do I hope these children will achieve, and how can I document this? So we'll move on. What does that look like in practice? So planning, I'll provide more opportunities for Naya and Jai to transform what they know into play. Jai is soon to be a big brother and Naya is a big sister. So I'll introduce a baby bath, towels, nappies, bibs, books about babies, etc. in the home corner. I'll role modelling and engage with their play using language to describe their actions and support each other to participate in pretend play. Evaluating and critically reflecting what learning happened, where to next, what went well, what could I improve on, and am I being inclusive and does my practice align with professional standards? And again, We might look at different things to support that checking in on being inclusive and aligning our practice with professional standards when we're talking about activities and experiences that we're planning for example, in this case, younger children, or if it was an example we were talking about with school-age children, we might think about a different approach to them as well. It's been quite melodramatic with my hands then. Who can I discuss this with? I love the fact that we talk about that one each time because it's really important that we connect with others, especially if we're challenged by any aspect of the planning cycle. And how can I document this? I like that one as well because it's really asking us to critically reflect on what's the choice I'm making here? What time do I have available? What techniques and what things work well for me and allow me to be able to demonstrate the planning cycle and also progress children's learning. Because if documenting that is getting in your way of actually doing the planning cycle, then maybe a different approach is necessary. So evaluating what this looks like in practice is, again, a slightly different version of what we talked about in the first example. So Jai and Naya went straight to the home corner. Naya began nursing one of the dolls and I asked if it was sleepy. She nodded yes and started to put the doll to bed. I asked Jai if he wanted to help, saying how he will soon be a big brother and can help Mum put the baby to bed too. Jai nodded and smiled and went to get another doll to put to bed. We giggled when I made an expression saying, I can smell something, P.U., and asked if their baby needs a nappy change. Naya said a strong yes and picked up a nappy. It was clear they understood what I was saying. Naya led the way, transferring the knowledge from what she has seen her parents do with her little sister. Jai observed both myself and Naya and mimicked our actions throughout the experience. I think this experience was a big success. I'm always surprised at how much babies know and how they can include that in their play. So again, sometimes your comments or your reflections on the play experiences will be a success. Sometimes not so much of a success. So that's okay to say both, you know. It's not a judgment on you as a professional. In fact, I think it's probably, if anything, a testament to you as a professional if you can critique both the positive and the negative, or not even negative, but how you might improve or do something different next time. Where to next? Provide more opportunities for Jai and Naya to engage in pretend play. Begin to introduce games with actions such as pat a cake, to pretend cake baking, and a telephone to talk to family and friends. That's another one I'm sure children are very well versed at now, aren't they? Engagements with phones. All right, so hopefully you found both of those examples useful and those prompting questions useful, and that you might be able to take that back to your practice tomorrow and have a think about ways that you engage with the planning cycle. The last interview that we have in tonight's session is an interview with Sam Malone, also an amazing and inspirational educator. And she is the educational leader at Coastwide Family Daycare. And she had some amazing things to share with us as well. And she is actually Tanya's educational leader. So let's have a listen to what Sam has to say.
Hello and welcome everyone to our interview with the lovely and knowledgeable educational leader, Sam Malone.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you again for joining us. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that I am interviewing on Gadigal land today. Do you know what land you're on?
I am residing on Darkinjung land today.
Beautiful. So Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've worked in the early childhood education and care sector since I was 18, so for 14 years now, and I've held roles in long day care, preschools, outside of school hours care, and now family daycare.
Wonderful. A lot of places to grab knowledge from the sector that you can
Yes, absolutely.
role now.
Yes.
So let's begin. So it can be tricky to know where to start when it does come to the planning cycle. How do you support your educators to decide how to document and plan for children's learning?
So I support our educators primarily by ensuring that they're confident in their decisions and in their knowledge. I find that a lot of our educators are fantastic at extending children's learning throughout the day and in the moment. And then when it comes time to sit down and document this, they feel less confident. So I have been working with them to find their strengths and figure out what works best for them. If it's a mix of, paper programs, apps, journals, floor books, whatever works for them so they feel confident. I feel they thrive when they are, feeling that they're doing it properly. And I really love working with them to discover their strengths. And again, family daycare is quite autonomous, so we need them to really feel like they know what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and our educators are fantastic, so I feel like they've got that down pat.
Absolutely. I really love that you've also taken a strength-based approach here. It is easy to get bogged down with the paperwork and the templates and the checklists, but I think you've listed a really good variety of ways to document that also play to your educator's strengths.
Absolutely, and I really encourage them to collaborate both with myself and other members of the coordination team and with other educators. We've got a few online groups that we use, so there's often questions being asked on what people use to program and giving examples of what that looks like for them as well, which is really, really helpful, I feel. And I feel like we're still learning, but I think COVID really threw that at everyone, and everyone just had to get on board really quickly. So that was one good thing.
So roughly how many educators do you have under your wing?
I think we've got about 120, 130, and we span a big area of New South Wales. So we've really got to make sure that we're really inclusive of everyone. And we've obviously got regional coordinators that look after their areas, but yeah, we're quite big. So we're very aware of how diverse everyone is and how we need to be so inclusive and cater to all of our wonderful educators.
Yeah, that's excellent. And are there many on your team that do cover those 120?
Yes. So we've got a fair few coordinators, and our coordination unit is fantastic. We've got people that work from home and then do overnight stays when they visit our regional communities and areas, and they do so much driving. They're so amazing.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yep.
How do you ensure that every educator's program does reflect the service philosophy and is implemented and reflected on as a continuing cycle of learning and teaching?
So each of our educators, they've got their own individual service philosophy, which is the why behind what they do. And I encourage our educators to look at this when they're planning their planned experiences in the program, and ask, what, and it does show what we do and why we do it. It's the why. As a scheme, we actually critically reflected on our philosophy over the last few months. We found it wasn't really where we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be more of a living document that was reflective of everyone. So we took to our educators, our families, our children, and the coordination unit and all the other stakeholders to really get their voices, and we rewrote it based on that. So that's actually come out this month, and we've dispersed it around all of our educators, and I really encourage them to look at it to make sure it aligns with the planned program. And it's a really good baseline to also sort of weave in amongst your program with the theorists and the principles and practices.
Absolutely. I love that you've just gone and redone your philosophy as well. You've identified the gap, that something's missing here, or we need to do this a little bit better. And I think what you said about making sure that it aligns with practice is really important, because I know that, if an authorised officer were to come into your service and you're doing something one way, however, your philosophy says you must be doing it this way, there's clearly a misalignment. So it's one of our most important, guiding documents, really.
It really is. And I think people, I think maybe back when I first started, it was just something that you just sort of wrote out. But I think now that it's being reflected on so often, it's really, really important to make sure that, as you said, it does align. It's the why behind why we do what we do. So.
Absolutely. So there's 120 wonderful family daycare educators under your wing.
Yep.
What do you think is the most important aspect of your role when it comes to supporting them?
I think that exactly that support is probably the most important aspect. And as it's a family daycare environment. It's not that centre-based environment where you can talk to your colleagues every day and bounce back ideas from them. So I really think that celebrating our educators and empowering them and showing off their strengths and showcasing them is really, really important. And as there is so many of us and we're so spread out, I think we've done that quite well as a scheme. We have, again, social media pages and things like that we share wonderful setups and achievements on, so that they can be recognised. So I think primarily support, empowerment, and recognising and celebrating our family daycare educators is one of the most important aspects of the role, definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think your point as well, that it can be a little bit isolating. You spread out over all of New South Wales. You do need to find ways to celebrate each other and make it feel meaningful despite not being there in person. So I love that you've taken that on in your role. Absolutely.
And I think because I've had that background in the other avenues of our sector, I've really recognised that it can be, quite isolating. And I'm always really surprised at how many educators don't feel that they're meeting, the quality frameworks and the elements. And then when I show them, the collaboration that you have with these families and these children is phenomenal. It's something that you don't get anywhere else. So I think really empowering them that they are actually already doing the things that they don't think they are is really important as well. Absolutely. When you're by yourself, it's hard to think that what you do every day is above and beyond. But then when someone comes in and is like, wow, this is fantastic, you've done it. It's a really empowering feeling. Definitely. And I think it's really important. So can you describe how you lead the development and the delivery of the educational program, particularly in relation to the planning cycle? So as educational leader, I work with our educators to make sure they've got a really thorough understanding of what the programming cycle looks like in practice. We have had educators attend professional development sessions that have been phenomenal, but then they've come back to their own services feeling like they're not doing it quite right. So we sort of reflected, and with no one size fits all approach, as we spoke about before, we thought, what can we do to make sure educators are feeling like they're meeting these or exceeding these? So we sort of brought it back to the elements. We've worked with our educators to encourage them to check back against the elements and the language in them to really promote, professionalism, and again, empowering them to make sure that they are making the right decisions. So, I've asked them to have a look at 1.3.1 and say, okay, so can I show that each child's learning is being assessed? And it's part of an ongoing cycle. And then can I show that every family is being informed about the program, as in 1.3.3? Sorry, I forgot. But we really encourage that as standard practice now. So if you are feeling unsure, to look back at those elements within the quality framework and check your practices against them. Absolutely. And I think there are so many resources and guidelines and frameworks to navigate through. So having a strong educational leader to lead you in that direction, to know what you're looking for, is really important here as well. So, but I think I found really effective showing real world examples of what programs look like in different services, can really reassure educators that they're doing the same thing or different, but it's all being met. There's an ongoing cycle and all the documentation is there. So I think that's really reassuring as well, if you can really break it down and show examples. How do you lead continuous improvement in Quality Area 1 to drive practice change? Personally, I provide access to professional development. So each month I host a professional development webinar with the topic being something around maybe our monthly focus or things that I've picked up in discussions with educators that there might be a bit of confusion around. For example, the one that we did for September was on the upcoming legislative changes in October, really breaking them down. It was a really dry sort of webinar, but really breaking them down and making sure that everyone knows what they're there for and what we're doing to make sure that we're meeting those legislative requirements. But I think providing that professional development every month and having it there to reflect back on, it's uploaded to social media channels, is a really, really important aspect of Quality Area 1. We also have, a space to promote and share perspectives from other educators, so promoting professional practices there. And I personally attend professional development that I then share with educators and the coordination unit to pass down to all of our educators. So I think we do it pretty well. We also share the self-assessment tool, the key improvements with our educators to get feedback and ideas on these. And we do that on a monthly basis to make sure that everyone's involved in the self-assessment tool as well. Yeah, I think we're most proud of our online group. So we've got an educator reference group and an engaging learning Facebook group that is attended to, the engaging learning one, by all of our educators. And that's really where it's like a professional space to collaborate and share ideas and discussions. So, yeah.
Well done. I think that's really important that you look at your documentation so regularly, like you just mentioned, you look at your self-assessment monthly. I think that's also keeps the momentum going as well. And you use avenues like online, which is fantastic.
I also really sort of try to make sure that I'm available if an educator will call up or email or send a text with a question. I try to make sure that I'm readily available to be able to answer that, because sometimes if they're sitting there doing documentation, they've had that question, I want to be able to answer it before they then have to go on to something else and forget all about it. So
yeah. Absolutely. So another tip for anyone else watching today, any educational leaders, is replying in a timely manner. So
yes, and I know it can be super hard, but I think it's really important to be there for our educators.
Awesome. Great response there, Sam. Thank you. Can you describe the link between professional development plans, quality improvement, and professional learning at your service?
So each coordinator and educator within our service have their own professional development plans, and these are added to and updated regularly. Many of the goals that we have that are set on these development plans fit in alongside our self-assessment tool, which I did reference before, and the key improvements within these. They're a focus for educators and coordinators. We touch base on them every monthly visit and see where we're at with them and if anything needs changing. And I feel like they're a really great basis for critical reflection. And it's sort of a check-in to see that, educators are consistently upskilling and learning more to promote best outcomes for all of our children.
Absolutely. And is that a requirement to have professional development plans or a certain amount of PD within your sector?
It's definitely a requirement for the professional development plans. There's no real requirement for the professional development, webinars and things that are attended. It's just something that we feel if we've got monthly opportunities to do it, why not do it? And there's things that come up every single month.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of free things out there as well. Now, we know that critical reflection is an important aspect of the role. How do you lead critical reflection on learning frameworks to guide practice?
I personally encourage our educators to critically reflect on both of the frameworks by, again, investigating each element and seeing what it means to them and reflecting on whether that reflects their practice. If not, why not? And is there a different way to do it? Is there a different way to meet that element and that learning outcome? And if so, what are they? So that's how I encourage critical reflection primarily on those frameworks. We are really excited for the updated frameworks to come through in 2024. They've been introduced to our educators when they were released, and we do have a lot of educators that are currently using them. But we've got 2 upcoming professional development webinars for October, November, where we're breaking down what they mean for every educator that we've got. And that's going to be prior to the implementation in 2024. But we're very excited about it. I'm very excited about the new principles, particularly the collaborative leadership and the Indigenous perspectives, along with sustainability, because they actually align with our key improvements. So works really well for us.
Absolutely. It's exciting, isn't it?
It is. And I think they were really due for an update, and the only way is up, really. I think it'll be a really, really good change to have these implemented going forward from 2024.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sam. I think this was really valuable for our current and perhaps even our future educational leaders to know. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not really. I just wanted to say that all the family daycare educators within our sector are phenomenal, and they deserve far more recognition than they get. And I'm so impressed and so proud to be working within the family daycare arm of our sector.
Awesome. Well, I hope you really enjoyed hearing from Sam as well. Again, just to very quickly, because I know we're out of time for the session content itself, and I want to click out of this presenter sharing my slides so I can see if we've got any questions, but just wanted to remind everyone to access the booklet. So it gives you lots of information about what we've shared tonight. You will be able to access this recording if you'd like to watch anything again, and you'll also be able to hear the interviews. They'll be available on the website as well. And I'm just going to exit to come back to the questions, but I also wanted to let you know, if you haven't already gotten involved in the professional development in your pocket, they are amazing, that whole set of, I believe this is number 28, so there's 27 other sessions there. So hop on to newsouthwalesfamilydaycare.org.au, and also you might want to join in on the PD in your pocket Facebook group if you haven't already joined. But some really great sessions there and some really great learning that you might like to engage with, including a great session on critical reflection if that's something that you're particularly interested in. So I'm going to see, I'll go to the question and answer section first. So if anyone's got any question, so Pari's asked for a question, an example for school aged children. Obviously, we won't be able to get that right now, but definitely something to think about for the future. There may be a session that's planned around school-aged children. And then we've got, what is Diane saying? Where is a theorist have to be referred to within the program when it's not within the regulations? Good point, Diane. I'm glad you were reading that. There's lots of things that I think are what I call them, I don't know, urban myths or Chinese whispers that are in the regulations. I think if you read through, though, Diane, if you read through the approved learning frameworks, they do talk about the fact that educators' professional judgment is informed by research, theory, contemporary practice, and their own knowledge and understanding of the children. So whilst it doesn't say anything about specifically referring them to them within the program, they should be influenced, your practice should be influenced by theorists and your understanding of them. Examples of the floor books to be sent out. You might even be able to Google that one. So I'm going to leave that one there. Does Sam do anything else in her role, or is she just the educational leader? I do think that is her role as the educational leader, and that's her sole role. But yes, she does have a lot on, but she seems to be able to manage that engagement, the professional learning that she provides, and the support that she provides for her educators. And yes, Renata has mentioned about seeing Tanya's program and what does it look like. Also got a question here about how many observations are recommended weekly. I would definitely answer that one to say that there isn't a set amount of observations. What I would say to you, and what I kind of liked about Tanya's answer, was the idea that she's observing every day and she's looking for things that are meaningful and relevant. So rather than focus in on how many, have a practice at thinking about what do I notice that's meaningful and relevant to, build off and, extend children's learning. So I would really encourage you not to think about a number, because that's when we start to think about, the idea that it's about X amount of entries rather than the quality of the entries. How many should I do daily journals? Again, same thing. It's not, you don't even have to do a daily journal if you don't want to. It's about recording meaningful and relevant information that supports you to engage with the planning cycle. So however you feel is the way that you can best manage that approach. And again, remember, that's what I said about the question there, to say, you think about what works for you in terms of, how will I document this? What's the best way for me to do that? What's manageable for me? What sort of information will support me to to capture the information that I need to, and to be able to demonstrate the planning cycle. I can't see too many more questions. I'm not sure if I'll just have a little quick look at the chat. Sometimes people put questions in the chat. Looks to me like everyone is very thankful, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Just flicking through here. Awesome, interesting and informative. I can see there's another question. Where are we? Can you share any programming template, please? So I'm not sure if that one was already shared in the messages, but the programming template that we shared in the presentation today is a New South Wales Family Daycare Association template. So if you want to check out the website, and also send an email if you can't find it, but you'll find that will be where you'll find that template that was referred to. Awesome. You can see Alison is mentioning what an inspirational educational leader Sam was. I thought the same thing. I was very, very much so impressed by both Sam and Tanja. They were both very dedicated and so very complimentary and supportive of the family daycare model, which I also thought was really awesome as well. Lillian's got a question here. Evidence of learning, where can we reference? I would like to answer that one, Lillian, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean. So if you could maybe ask me another question, I'd be happy to answer it. Angela's written something in the chat as well, although they keep moving so quickly. So every day we need to show meaningful learning. Learning is occurring all the time. Not necessarily, Angela. There's no requirement to document every day or any particular time frame. Remember, we looked at the regulations, we looked at the quality standards, and we looked at the frameworks, learning frameworks. None of them specify that you need to do X amount or you need to do it every day. I guess what I was trying to say there is just, I guess be aware of the opportunity to look for learning every day. You don't have to write things every day, but you might find that once you get in the swing of really looking for learning as to where it happens, you might find that you do write something every day. No pressure there. And yep, so Natalie's mentioned a really good point there. Some documentation can be done over a period of time. So if there's learning every day, you won't be doing a written observation. Some might be a learning story or a journey over time. I couldn't agree more. I love that idea of noting. It's not always about writing a moment in time. It's actually, that idea of maybe when you've noticed a child doing something many times is when you write down that sort of learning. Definitely. Is really important. I like that one, Nikki, considering the wow moments. Just checking if we've got any more questions. So Jeanette, I'm confused. So should I do more group ops or individual? Either is fine. I think if you're doing group observations, Jeanette, I think the most important thing is there to think about whether or not it's the same learning is happening for all children. You could do either one, but sometimes I notice when people do group observations, they put the same one in all children's kind of records. Well, not all children would have been experiencing the same learning or getting the same thing out of it. So again, it's really about noting information for children's individual children's learning. Awesome. Thanks, Emma. Lillian's come back to me. Parents want to know what do they learn each day. Again, your parents might want to know that, Lillian, or maybe they are happy to share information, more detailed information each month or each week or whatnot. I think it's about that idea of what you've said there, what do they learn each day is a really important one. And, I guess you set the tone with that as to when you decide about that. Nitu has said, if children's learning taking so long, shall we keep going on to keep it in the programs? I think that's a really good point, Nitu. I think we really need to question whether or not so the interest, for example, might be something that stays around for a period of time, but the learning should be growing and developing as part of that ongoing planning cycle. So the learning should be building, and we should also be making sure that we're capturing information about learning across all of the different 5 learning outcomes and their key components. Awesome. I think that's us. I think we're Nikki's giving us a the wrap up there. So thanks, Nikki. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I good luck in looking at your updating and improving your confidence and your ability to be able to effectively demonstrate the planning cycle in your family daycare program. Have a great night and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.